So baking is the process of taking some information and putting it into our texture. That sounds pretty vague, but that's because we could be baking shadow information or color IDs or normal information. So basically making the low resolution read details on the texture to make it alter the normal so that it resembles the high resolution models that we baked from. In other words, rather than needing to calculate some information in real time, we can bake it into a texture and sort of fake it and give the game engine a much easier time rendering our asset. So we're going to start with baking our ambient occlusion, and this is simply all those darker areas that you tend to get in the nooks and crannies and basically where not as much light is bouncing around. And we're going to need some images to bake onto, so first let's take a look at image management in Blender. So textures aren't saved automatically as we work with them in Blender. We're going to need to save them manually, and currently this image doesn't exist anywhere outside of Blender. If we make changes to this default color grid and then close Blender and then reopen it, we'll have lost all those changes because we need to save the image first. And you can tell that the image hasn't been saved because of the little asterisks that we get next to the word image in the header bar of the image editor. And we could do one of two things. We can save it externally somewhere, so we can go save as image, or we could go and pack the image as a PNG. So that's going to pack it into the blend file itself. If we pack it into the blend file, it means that we don't need to worry about the location of any external files. And the blend file will increase, of course, but it may keep things simple in this case, as rather than using any external image editing program, I'm going to do everything in Blender. So let's save this color grid by packing it as a PNG file. So let's just click on that, and then you'll notice that little asterisk has gone away now. After doing that, I recommend saving the blend file, and then when we return back to this save file, the image will be preserved with it. So I'm just going to go Control S, and then I'm going to save this blend file that I'm working from at the moment. Then what we'll need to do is create another image that we'll bake our ambient occlusion into. So let's just go Image and then go New Image, and let's call this Ambient Occlusion. And then for the size, let's make it 512 by 512. And the color I'm going to make white because these maps tend to be multiplied onto the color maps, and so white will be ignored. And so we're really looking to just record the darker information that the bakes give us, not introduce our own darkness by having like a flat background black color or a mid-gray color or basically anything lower than white. Then we can click OK. And this is our new image, and you can see again we get this little asterisk. So I'm just going to go image and pack as image, and this is now currently our ambient occlusion image. In fact, if we pull down our images that we've got to choose from, we can see we've got the ambient occlusion and we've still got our color grid there. Incidentally, the objects in the scene are still sort of associated with that color grid because we haven't swapped things around in edit mode yet. So to tab into, if I just select this cone area here and tab into edit mode, and then with all the faces selected in the UV editor, I can now come down and then switch it to the ambient occlusion, and it will use this ambient occlusion texture that we've made to bake into. And you can see, of course, it updates in the 3D view as well. So I'm just going to go around and associate this ambient occlusion texture with everything. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and with all our UVs selected, I'm going to go and find the ambient occlusion image, and you can see that updates in the 3D view as well. Next, for the base, all these UVs are now selected with the A key, and then we can select the ambient occlusion for the base there. And then same for the camera object itself. Something that you can do is actually just specify individual faces. So if we was to do that for those particular faces, let's see, if we just selected this one, for example, and then switch that to the color grid, you can see that just the color grid is on that face. So if we just select this face at the top, it switches the image associated with it, and then we can select this face now with the color grid on it, and we'll get a representation of that. So if we just select everything and then just switch it all to be the ambient occlusion, that should make things look a little bit more sensible.